Welcome, everybody, to Deep Space Chats. This is a podcast hosted by the Deep Space Initiative, and this is our second season. My name is Stuart. I am one of the new co hosts joining on this season. I am based in Scotland, but originally from South Africa with a background in marketing and communications, but with a curiosity about space. And that's what brings me here. I'm very excited to be part of this new podcast. And with me is my new co host, Reginald. Reggie, do you want to introduce
Yeah,
yourself?
I'm excited to do so. So I'm Reginald from Ghana, Accra, Ghana. And yes, like Stuart said, I'll also be the co-host for this amazing podcast. My background is in aerospace engineering. I'm currently actively serving with the Ghana Air Force. Aside that my passion for the technical things, I'm also very, very much invested in conversations about space, STEM education for young people, and we are really going to have an exciting time on this podcast. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
And this is the second season. So the last one was hosted by the amazing Dr. Jennifer Fogarty, who's a former NASA chief scientist and the former CTO of Deep Space Initiative, along with NASA astronaut Dr. Serena Arnon Chancellor. But now, of course, we are taking over, Reginald and I, and very excited to be joined by probably the face and the name that you mostly associate with DSI so far. And that is, of course, Sara. Hello, Sara, and welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's so good to be here. I think this season's going to be a really fun one because I think the three of us, bring in so many different perspectives, backgrounds, experiences, and I think it's going to be really interesting conversations. I think the three of us, share a lot of curiosity about the field, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Nice to have you on here. And of course, we had to start with you just to set the scene and explain a little bit about what we'll be looking at going forward. But really, the most important question I think that everybody has is about your experience in space. You have actually been to space, which is not something a lot of people, can claim. And it's obviously going to be one of the first things I think both of us would like to talk to you about. Are you tired of talking about space yet at all?
I mean, honestly, no. I think it's every time I get asked about space, it's a chance for me to relive it a little bit because I spend a lot of my time kind of on autopilot and I work so much that it's really difficult for me to kind of stop sometimes and, think about things. So I think the only period that I've had to really process space was right after. But ever since then, I've been so busy with so many things that I don't really get a chance to sit and like think about this experience or think about what I saw. So every time I get asked this question, I really try to take time to really picture it and visualize it and relive it every time I tell the story. So it's a chance for me to learn new things sometimes from, the little details that I share. It kind of, and also allows me to feel those feelings again, which I think is really, really valuable, honestly.
Yeah, I get that. For those of us who haven't gone, hearing someone talk about space is like someone describing a whole new dimension, maybe from the metaverse or from a video game or something. But for you, it's your lived reality and it's part of your mission, right?
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for it, and I feel like it's definitely a responsibility to share it because we always think about space and Earth as two very, very separate things, and we've always thought about space as being something that's so far away. And whenever anyone even learns in Egypt that I work in the field, even not that I've gone to space, it's a shock. So we always look at space as something that's just so far away that's not for people like us, or that we don't it doesn't it's not a common thing. So I think the more we talk about it, the more it's reachable, the more we work in it, and the more we realize that there's so much that we can do in the field, the more people are going to feel, or the more all of us are going to feel that we belong there, that's something that we do there, and like we don't have to just watch from a distance.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, Sarah is first of many, first African woman in space, first Arab woman in space. So for you, was this something that was all part of your plan growing up, or was this like an opportunity that came up? Because I think the question would be, how did this happen? Was this part of your dream growing up as a young girl in Cairo or wherever?
It wasn't actually something I dreamt about growing up. And honestly, I don't think I felt like I was allowed to dream about something like this. I grew up in Egypt, and for us, we didn't really have rocket launches. We didn't have cartoons that talked about space. We didn't really have books that even, mentioned astronauts. And the only astronaut that I could, like, if I was told to picture or to visualize an astronaut, and even now, like, I think the first thing that would come to mind is a white NASA military fighter pilot man, right? We never really think about like anyone else being an astronaut, or at least that's not the common thing and that's not the first thing that comes to mind. So for me growing up, it wasn't something that I even thought was a possibility. It was not even something that, like, in this dimension that I could even, you know, possibly even think to dream about. So it was that far away. So for me, it just kind of happened naturally as my career progressed. I went into engineering. I started my career in mechanical engineering, focused on mechatronics. So, and did my master's in biomedical engineering, focused on stem cells and also robotic surgery for a while. And then when I worked in industry for a bit in augmented reality. So for me, it was always about solving problems, and that's kind of like what I took with me every step of the way. And then it honestly happened from this existential crisis that I was going through. And again, the way I dealt with this whole, wondering about the world and like asking about questions about our origins or just the meaning of everything was, how do we, like, what do we need, or what tools do we need to have in order for us to get closer to answering those questions? So again, it was again a problem that needed solving. And space for me was, at least my justification was, that we need to be going further into space in order to have the technology, or kind of like the physics, in like a different, dimension, for us to be able to develop the technologies in order for us to go back and have that understanding. So it didn't happen from wanting to explore space because of something that I saw or wanted to it didn't come from that. It wasn't a dream. It was just a, I don't want to call it a means to an end, because that's also not what it is, and like it takes also away from that. But it was more of, this is the only way for us to have answers to everything. And it also, throughout that journey, I discovered that it is the natural progression of human beings. We are explorers, and we have been exploring Earth, from the highest points to the deepest points in the sea. And, we're constantly doing that, and it's in our blood, and it's something that, it's just the natural, it's just who we are as human beings. So for us to be able to explore space, to understand where we came from and where we're going, it was just very, very natural. And for me, I'm just very, very convinced that we need to become multiplanetary, and we are going to become multiplanetary. I have no doubt that humanity is going to become multiplanetary. Whether or not it's going to be in my lifetime is, question. It's a question, but I think we are getting there. So for me, that's how it all started. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that we have kind of representation from Ghana, South Africa, and Egypt all in this conversation, because I think you mentioned something in that answer around, uh, a non-Western perspective on space. If you don't necessarily grow up with the idea that space is for you, that can be a challenge. And yeah, do you have a take on what do you think more of the global South, or maybe you want to be more specific about where you grew up, around parts of the Arab world? What kind of perspective there is on space, if any?
I think that's a really good question. And I think there's several parts to this, because Africa and the Arab world are becoming part of the space field a little bit later in the game. So we're coming into it now within the past decade, where we're seeing more and more space agencies pop up around the African continent. The space agencies around the GCC and the Arab world are really, really booming, and they're really doing so much now, and they're actively contributing to the field. And the thing is, it's never been about who gets there first. So you're not really seeing countries around Africa competing with one another in the field. It's a little bit different. And it comes from also the idea that because it's not something that we're trying to, go to first, we have a more collaborative approach. And also, another part of it is that I think is very, very important is that in order to justify spending all of this money on a space program, we have to answer the why, and we have to really make sure that we're utilizing the technologies that we have in the space field in order to benefit and solving challenges on Earth. So I think there's also that part where there's these two very, very distinct, you know, like things that we're seeing in the global south and the Arab world and Africa that is very different than what we're seeing in the West, and this whole you know, Cold War between the USSR and the US, and then now with China and the US. It's just very different. These are superpowers in the field that are just kind of competing to be leaders or remain leaders in the field, whereas for the Arab world and for Africa, it's very different. We're always kind of looking, how do we benefit the country? How do we have agency over our own data that we're collecting so that we benefit, the communities, or we benefit our people, because we're so dependent on the data that's coming from remote sensing. We're so dependent on data that's coming from space. So it's all about, why are we doing this, and how can we reduce the resources needed in order for us to achieve those goals, and how can we do it as fast as possible and as cheap as possible. But also we need to really always focus, and that's something that I've been really trying to work on too, is justifying the why. We always have to look at, why are we going to space? And that's the question that I've had to answer so many times. Why are we going to space and, like spending all this money and not really focusing on the problems we have here on Earth? And it's such an easy question to answer. At least for me, I think it's so easy and it's so straightforward. And I'd love to hear your answers, on this. Like, why are you interested in space? What got you interested in this? And why do you think, South Africa and Ghana should be a part of it? And I know there's a part of it that's, about dreaming about something that's just so much bigger than us. I think that's something that cannot be, you know, we really have to think about that too. We can't, just put it on the side, because I think that's super important. Because if you give a chance to younger generations to at least dream about being part something that's just so much bigger than themselves, it changes their brain chemistry as growing up. When I see kids now, Lauren, when I see my niece, for instance, she's 4.5, and when she was growing up, she saw me on TV. For her, like I talk about, like when I tell her, like some of my friends are astronauts, so I tell her like about them, and she keeps saying like, "Oh, I want to go to space with you and your friends," and it's such a normal thing for her. When she dreams about something, it's just so different than when I had to dream about something when I was 4 and 5. When I was her age, it just wasn't even like it was just not a thing. Like there was absolutely no chance that I would ever in my life meet someone that was even remotely close to the space field, let alone, have gone, or, to have that now, and also, have that representation, or have that knowledge that is possible, or that is normal, and also as a woman that that's the normal thing to do. It just changes so many things. It changes so many things. It changes the way that what she thinks is possible. Changes how big her dreams can be, and it changes also the belief of what can and cannot be done too, because now she doesn't have that barrier that's, stopping her. When I was growing up, I was told not to do this, not to do that, to be normal, to really like be more realistic. The number of times that I've been told in my life to be realistic, or that I was, rebelling and like being interested in mechatronics, it was just a form of rebellion. It was never because I was interested in it. It can't be. Like, how could that be? And, it was always looked at negatively. But if you remove that negativity from it, and you just kind of like make it a good thing to dream about something that's big, it changes so many things, because then you don't have to fight the fight every single step of the way. And I think that's so important. I think it's really, really important.
I'm going to let Reggie come back in to ask you the next question, but just on the back of that, I think that that's a really important answer from the perspective of human spaceflight. Initially, you were asking earlier about why we think maybe other countries, like our own countries, should be interested in space, and I think there's a really strong argument to be made about a sort of Earth observation reason, and you touched on that, and the ability to look down on the Earth, and that's kind of practical, and it's happening, and it's important, and this is one way that African countries have started to be in space and have a presence. Human spaceflight is kind of something altogether different, and just the leap in complexity and the leap in cost and logistics and everything else just puts it in another league all of its own. But at the same time, you wouldn't be able to tell the story of your niece without that human element, right? There's something about seeing ourselves up there, and especially around representation of you as a woman and also where you're from globally, that makes a huge difference to that story. So there's the practical reasons to be in space, but the aspirational stuff will always be a really important factor. So yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's why you're here, and that's why that multiplier effect of you going and then telling everybody else about it is so powerful. And it's kind of also why we chose to start this podcast with you right up there. But anyway, enough on that. Reggie, over to you.
Yeah, Sarah, I think what you're saying is so, so important. I think if you look back 10 years ago, back in Africa, people will not be taking the whole idea of going to space and space technology abstract. But currently now, with stories from people like you, people are starting to see the possibility, and it's more of like a stretch, something that helps people to aspire and become more than themselves. And we also see the utilization of space technology in, like you said, in healthcare, in disaster management, and in telecommunications. So it's something that our young people are starting to believe now, and I think that's one thing that I'm really excited about, because at first it was like we don't belong in this league, or we don't belong in this community. But now even the hope, or even having the faith, that spark, that people like you have started, has created that kind of possibility. And I see it all around, when we go for our STEM programs, we have, like I told you the other time, some students in Ghana got together to build their own antennas to track.
I think talking about it, and really kind of like also for you guys to share your backgrounds, and I'm actually curious, like what led you guys into the space field? Like what got you interested in the space field to start with? Like when was that spark for you? Were you dreaming about, space? What was it for you guys actually? I'm really curious.
Well, Stuart, I don't know if you want me to start, but I think for me,
Yeah.
Growing up, like you use the word rebel, I think I had that kind of tendencies of not really. I think I really thought there was a bigger world than what I could see in my community. So I started, reading out. And I think one thing my dad did for me was to register me in a library. And we used to go there all vacations. That was where we spent most of the times. But just reading about the earth, reading about, the Greeks, and then the Renaissance period, people started exploring, and Newton and all that. It really got me interested. So I really wanted to do something that was beyond me. And I also wanted to do something that was a bit difficult. So when my high school grades came, they were very good. And my parents were all, hey, do medicine, do optometry, do something that you can get a job. But I think I felt that I was going to do something. So fortunately for me, when I got to high school, that is when my university has started their aerospace program. So I said, okay, this is like kind of something for me. And truth to be told, when I went to class, we were just 17. I think it was the smallest class in the whole College of Engineering. Most people did the traditional engineering, mechanical engineering, and electrical. So I think I've always believed that I was sort of called to go into something that was beyond me and not just be in it, but also inspire more people to get into it. So that's how come I go into space. And also when I started my podcast, I was reaching out to people who are doing amazing things like you, and I got a chance to talk to some astronauts, and they rekindled my kind of because I think that after some time I folded it on one side. Hey, there's like these kind of youthful things that get you excited, but now I'm getting more realistic. But when I started talking to people in the community again, the astronauts again, it's like there's still lots more to be done. So, I started researching, connected back to see the space activities that's happening in my country. And I realized that, wow, there's a lot of unknown people who are also really passionate about space and astronomy and all that. So I quickly got in touch with the Ghana Astronomical Agency, got in touch with very, very passionate. And one thing amazing about the space field is that everybody is really, really passionate. Everybody loves what they are doing. Everybody is super friendly, and they all want more people to, to come in. So, I mean, based on that passion, and I also got connected to DSI. So that's a little bit about my own background. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, what you've said there, even though we've come from very, very different elements of the sector, I can say that the enthusiasm to bring in new people is kind of the reason I'm sitting here as well, because I get the sense that my maths is not as good as either of you two. As much as I was very curious about space as a child, and I think boys are almost encouraged into space a lot more to bring it back to kind of childhood upbringing. The kind of main attractions of dinosaurs in space is very much, I think, what young boys are encouraged to enjoy and participate in. And you get books and you get movies, and I grew up on Star Wars, and it was maybe an obvious or easier kind of road to get into space when I was younger, but then actually turning that into something practical that would become a career never occurred to me whatsoever. And I think maybe the education system had something to do with that, because I will say that there's maybe an unnatural divide in the avenue that you go down career-wise at around university level, or thinking about that, where I studied humanities, and I was good at writing, I was good at kind of drama, and I was good at all the kind of humanity side of things. This is why I ended up studying journalism, because I was always curious no matter what, and that way I could kind of explore many different subjects. But I think I was kind of forced into either doing humanities or doing sciences. And sure, it maybe wasn't my strongest suit, but once I was through university, it felt to me like the choice had been made. So I'm coming to the space sector really, really late, and yeah, with no engineering or maths or technical skills whatsoever, but an enthusiasm and an interest in it. And from what I can tell, there is actually a need for people with the other set of skills that I've just mentioned to help do the storytelling, to help do the marketing, to help communicate all the good work that is going on. So that's kind of what brought me to it. And yeah, it's been really interesting also in Scotland as well, where I was looking particularly to contribute to a sector that's happening locally. And what I did know already about Scotland is that it leads the way when it comes to renewables, for example. Lots of wind power here, lots of new technologies around like wave generation, and other like turbine type technology for developing more renewable power. And that was really interesting. But another much more unknown sector is space. More satellites are manufactured in Scotland than anywhere else in Europe. There's launch coming along the way, so we're not talking about launching future Saras into space, unfortunately, just satellites. But again, that's a pretty major contribution. And nobody knows about it, or not enough people know about it. And that's kind of what brought me into it. Because I think, it's important to, and maybe to bring it back to a question then for you, Sarah. In Scotland, like we're talking about satellite launch mostly and satellite manufacture, and then all the downstream application of that data and applying it to numerous fields. But what we don't have is the human exploration side of things. Is there a connection between the two? Is there a way to get people maybe who know about human exploration because it captures the headlines more, and to get them also interested in everything else that the space sector is about?
I think it's going back to the why also. And also explaining, because like you were saying, I think like you touched on really, really important points here when you mentioned, the different backgrounds that are needed in the space field. Because like how I look at it is space is just the natural progression of human beings. It's not something that, like resisting it is just, it's like resisting AI now. So would that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense to resist AI. It makes more sense to be a part of it and actually to maybe create more regulations, to work on the ethics part, to really like see how it can be utilized and also encourage different countries to utilize it to like create more like an ecosystem for it, to create more job opportunities in it. So it's not about, resisting innovation. It's about being a part of it and really making it more inclusive and making sure that different countries have a say in where it goes. And space is the same thing. Like if we choose to not be a part of it because it's expensive or because we don't really understand why we're doing it, number one is explaining why we're doing it and really getting the public on board by really explaining why we're doing it. And I was having this conversation with my friend the other day, and she has nothing to do with the space field. She's never been interested in it. And I don't really like to push ideas onto people. I kind of like how I like to do it. And honestly, I learned this from a very, very old professor of mine in mechatronics, and I give him credit to that, is by asking small questions and allowing the other person to look for the answers. And by doing that, you come to your own convictions yourselves. And that's also a way to make sure that what you're saying is not biased, but it's actually coming from a place where it's, this is the data, this is how it's, why it's like, why it's useful. This is where it's coming from, sorry, first, and this is what it's doing. So in the space field, it's exactly that. So being like, number one is, just apart from the human exploration side, like I think let's put the human exploration on the side. It's expensive. It's not that I'm not for it, of course, like I'm 1,000% for it, and
That'll be some breaking news. You heard it first on this podcast.
No, I mean, I'm all for it. I want to push for that. And I truly, truly, like, my dream is for us to have an all African mission to space and for us to like have representation, to have like a say in where the space field is going. But apart from that, it's so, so important for all of humanity. It touches every single field that you can think of around you. It touches agriculture, it touches climate, it touches the healthcare system, it touches, just literally everything. Can you think of a field on Earth that is, you know, that the space field doesn't really touch? It's so difficult to find. It's so difficult to even like find one. Even if you talk about sports, like we can actually maybe like at some point someday invent different sports in space too. So it touches so many things and it's also really crucial for it. And I think creating those opportunities and really building those ecosystems in the different countries around, let's say Africa, let's take Africa as an example. Africa has so many resources. Africa is very, very, very dependent and reliant on satellite imagery. It's relied on satellite imagery for its agriculture and for its land and for its resources. And, like there's a lot of remote regions that have, that are so far away from the nearest clinic or healthcare institution. So we need also, imagery also to locate them, to be able to see what we can do in order to bring them closer, to really like bring things closer together. So my new company also Pulse, like we're working on the healthcare systems. That's why like I think that's the one that just comes quickest into mind. But there's so many things that, you know, a lot of the technologies that have been developed for space, you might be using today, like you might have been using on your phone today, earlier today, or a lot of things in the medical industry too, like a lot of things that have been developed for the like a little piece that has been developed for the International Space Station has been used for parts of a heart transplant, you know, like parts of like the memory foam that you're using, you know, it's was developed for space. So many things that we just don't know of. I think the problem with the space field, and like you mentioned, Stuart, too, because we always thought that only engineers and or pilots or the military was a part of it, then you forgot about, not forgot, but it wasn't thought to be important to storytell or to really communicate to the public what was going on. And that's why I think now a lot of companies are really heavily investing on build this communication, really talking about how do we communicate the scientific part of it to the general public, because you have the general public has to be on board. You have like, and they have to come to that conclusion themselves. They can't be force fed information, and it can be force fed in the same way that, and it can be communicated in the same way that we communicate as engineers or scientists or doctors. It has to be done in a way where it's simply put and it kind of relates them to their day to day. Because for someone who, let's say, in a small town in Egypt, you know, living paycheck to paycheck, why would they ever care about space? Unless they know that if they cared about space and if their government was investing more in the space field, then it would create this whole ecosystem where more companies would be able to be built for that, which would create more opportunities, which would incentivize institutions and universities to, you know, dedicate more, invest more in their education system in areas where they're not investing in now, or updating the curriculums in ways where to match the rest of the world, which in turn, you know, takes the level of the whole education system a little bit higher, which again, you know, so I think it has so many levels that we don't really communicate. And I hope, Stuart, you know, we need you there, Stuart.
Well, it's a good start.
Wow. So I think that's literally what you're doing with the Deep Space Initiative, and even with this podcast, just getting more people to coming. I think in West Africa we have a proverb that if you climb a ladder to a higher place or to a better place, that the best thing is to leave the ladder, you know, leaning on the wall, so that many others can also, you know, climb it. You don't just climb the ladder and carry the ladder with you, and then you say, hey, look at me, I'm on this high ground, and all of you, you know, are here. So I can really, you know, feel the passion and the energy. And, you know, I think even you are even saying too much on this episode. We have some more episodes where you would, you know, because you're really passionate about it. I think our listeners will be really passionate about how, you know, they can be located from space technology up to where they are, maybe in, you know, Africa or Southeast Asia. And how, if you are not even thinking about space, you know, through the information, you know, and the conversations that we have on this podcast. And I'm sure we're not just going to have only Sarah. You're going to have different experts, you know, and like the name of the podcast is Deep Space, you know, Chats. You're really going to go really deep, and then let you know, like the term you use, visualize, so that you can, just like your friend was able to see that, yes, I get it. I think many more others, wherever they are, would also see, and then they'll start believing, and then they will start. Yeah. But still, people are still really, you know, have some questions about space travel and being an astronaut. So I think it's a question that, you know, people ask a lot. What is the training like to become an astronaut, and like, what is the most, you know, difficult part? Do you have to fast all the time before you you return from space, or, you know, how do you get your body prepared for it? You know, so what is the hardest part of the training preparing for an astronaut? Yeah.
I think there's physical training and then there's psychological training. I think the physical part is there's definitely a lot of things that are very challenging, because a lot of it is also very mental. Let's say, for example, doing G-force training. So part of the training that I did was on an aerobatic flight. So similar to a centrifuge, you just had to like you have to train using different breathing techniques to just kind of like contract your lower body and just have like very small exhales so that you make sure that your blood doesn't flow from your brain like down. So you have to make sure to like hold it up while like the gravity is pushing it down. So it's a lot of mental slash physical training that you have to undergo, resisting passing out. I think one of my trainings, in one of the aerobatic flights that I was part of, um, we went up to from -3, so like this way, up to +8, which was really, really high. And for a second there, so while I was doing like the breathing, for a second there, I really almost passed out. But it's just part of the training. I think mentally, there's a lot of mental to the training as well. So doing an analog mission was really, really eye-opening because you're in isolation and in an enclosed and confined environment with your crew. And then you have a very, very busy schedule. For us, we couldn't have access to caffeine. We had like our schedule, like scheduled 5 minutes out of like 5 minute intervals even. I was medical officer, so I had the responsibility of taking care of my crew. And we were eating freeze-dried food. We had no access to sunlight. So you're undergoing so much stress, and then you're in this environment that is, well, like you and the rest of your crew are very you're all A types, so you want to do your absolute best all the time. You want to make sure that you're at peak performance, even though everything else is telling you that you cannot be at peak performance. So you have this fight between the two where you're always feeling like you're not doing enough. And I think that mental part is really, really, it's really interesting to undergo because then you realize, and honestly, I was very lucky to be medical officer because I had these very intimate one-on-ones with each of my crew to realize that we were all feeling exactly the same way, like we weren't doing enough, even though we were doing as much as we can, but it was because physically we just could not be at peak performance because of that environment. But like mentally, you want to be at peak performance, but you cannot because mentally you cannot because of this environment that you're in, and you want to be. So you have this constant fight. And then once you realize that you're all going through the same thing and you work together, it just clicks. And you no longer feel that. You learn your strengths, you learn about your strengths, you learn about your weaknesses, you learn about, like how tough are you on yourself? What do you need to work on? All those things. I think that's really, really, I think the physical part is always doable. Like I think I used to teach CrossFit and I used to teach yoga for many years. So, like I'm used to pushing my body to the absolute limit, and I know, and I love doing that. So I'm no stranger to that. So that's never been the difficult part. Like it is very difficult, it is very challenging, but it's always doable. You can, you can push your body. You can like you can work until like you puke, but it's doable, right? I think the mental barrier is the one that is not talked about enough. I think it's, I think noticing when things are happening and why they're happening and realizing that like taking yourself out of the situation a lot of the time also. And part of the training that we did before the space flight was a lot of meditation, a lot of visualization, in order to like be the most present during the space flight. And that was really interesting. That was really, really interesting because I was never someone who meditated before, and doing that for like 3, 4 times a day because it was a requirement before the trip, before the flight, um, really did change how I handle stress, change how I perceive fear, changes how I react to things, changes how I see things. Um, it completely changes my relationship with risk taking or with fear. It's something that I never really realized. And also, a friend of mine asked me that question months ago after I came back. Was the one thing that you miss, that you think like from before and after your space flight? And I think my relationship with fear is just very different. I feel like you have a lot more um, control with like you can really no, I'm not gonna say easily, but you can control how you feel, and you can control whether or not you um like feel or perceive the feeling of fear in different moments.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, I mean, you've done probably one of the scariest things you can do, so no wonder your relationship with fear is different. I was wondering though, now having done all that training, gone to space on a suborbital flight with Blue Origin, and come back, and thinking about the chats we've had around wanting to increase access to space, and wanting to see a broader range of people go and have that experience, or just be involved in some capacity, any capacity, not even just the astronaut side of things, but in general, having come back down and thought about all of this and experienced all of this, what would you do differently with the training? Would you add something? Would you take something away? Was there something that was obviously missing? And maybe you want to answer this first of all from how you would personally feel, and then maybe secondly, in the name of expanding who can access space, like what else would you include in the training?
That's a good question. I think in terms of training, I don't know if there's anything more that honestly, like the training that you do, or the length of training, or the depth of training that you do really depends on the length of the mission and the objective of the mission, right? I think for a suborbital mission, the amount of training that required is not that much. I had been training for a year and a half before my flight because that was kind of something that I wanted to do for my career, and it's still something that I want to continue doing. But was it a requirement for this specific flight? Not really, no. Because they're trying to make space more accessible, and I'm so, so happy about that. We need to be able to make it more accessible also in terms of the training that's required. Because if you have to undergo extremely extensive training before every single flight, then we won't be able to send as many people. And also you're going to be a lot more selective with the type of people that you're sending up there. And I think being able to go to space should be for just absolutely everyone. It shouldn't be for the select few. It shouldn't be for the elite, or it shouldn't be an exclusive club. It shouldn't be for just, for one part of the world. It should literally be for every single person. The first thing I said when I came back from space was that everyone needs to see this. So the right or the access to space, it should be definitely for everyone. If anyone wishes to go, they should be able to. So either you should be able to afford to go, or you should be able to, want a career in space and be able to pursue that, regardless of, everything else. Where in the timeline we're in now, we're still very early. So if we're looking at accessibility, we're still in the very, very early stages. So mind you, when I went to space, it had been less than 70 women that had ever gone since the beginning of time. It was about 630 people since the beginning of time. So it was still less than 1,000 people that have ever gone to space ever. So like when we're talking about like the timeline, it's still like we still haven't even finished blinking, you know? We're still like in the beginning of the blink in the timeline of humans in space. So we're still very early, but we're getting there. I think access is becoming bigger. The fact that an Egyptian was able to go, was able to get selected to go, even though when I was getting selected, I calculated it, and the selection process, it was my chances were 0.02% of getting selected. So it's very, very low. It's extremely, extremely low, but we're getting there. It's still not 0.000. It's 0.02. So I think this is going to continuously increase. I think we're going to need more and more people to go to space. And also a part of it too is that when you think about, going to space as just a natural progression of human beings, it's also a chance for us to, look at this as the next phase of humanity, and a chance for us to not make the same mistakes that we've been making before here on Earth. It's a chance for us to prove to ourselves that we are like more unified as human beings, because I think like when you have a community or a civilization on a different celestial body, let's say on the moon or on Mars, you're not gonna look at passports anymore. You're not really gonna look at another person from where they come from or the borders on the map anymore. I think that's just gonna be very different because, well, you're on the moon now. Like, countries don't make any sense, right? And I think once we get there, I think it's gonna be a chance for us to look at it in a way where, well, now we're all doing it like for the betterment or for the future of humanity because it benefits everyone, and by working together it's going to benefit everyone. It's And by fighting or competing, we're going to lose because once you add competition here, incentives change, agendas change, and it just kind of just of course messes things up. And we've seen what it's done on Earth. We're more likely to be making exactly the same mistakes that we're making here again on Earth. So for me, like how I think about it is that it's going to happen. It's the natural progression of humanity. Let's use that opportunity to prove that we can do better and we can, you know, be humans, just humans and nothing else. I think that's the thing that it just drives me insane sometimes to think about like being in 2025 and that's not the case. That, you know, your passport like, you know, adds or lessens value of a person. It just makes absolutely no sense. You know, like it just baffles me every single time. Like it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And when you look at, especially now in 2025, when the world is really like is more divided than ever, we're going backwards when we could use this as an opportunity to move forward. So let's not, you know, bring all of that to space. Let's kind of use that as an opportunity to just do better because we can do better. And let's prove ourselves, you know, wrong or right, whatever you believe in.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about these conversations that we are having. I heard a saying that to go really high, you have to first really go deep. And I know every successful thing, every successful movement, every inspiration starts with a conversation. So I think these are conversations that we'll have with you and different people in the DSI community and the greater space community to get, more people um joining and also get inspired by this. Yeah, and I also want to find out from you, Sarah, do you dream, are you planning of going back to space? Because now you're no longer international. We have people who are international and we have people who are interplanetary, intergalactic, if that's a term. So do you have plans to go back to space? Yeah.
Um, yeah, I dream about it every day.
Wow.
Honestly, it's definitely something I think as soon as I came back, I just wanted to go back up. It's really something, it's unlike anything that I've ever experienced. And, you know, we didn't really touch on why I was sent to space. I think maybe something that we can kind of like touch on too is because it's going to make sense, I promise. It's going to make sense as to like why. And like I was sent to space to analyze something called the overview effect, which is what happens to your brain when you see Earth from space.
Yeah.
And before I went, I'm an engineer and I'm a scientist. So I've always been trained to have an open mind and to really be observant and objective about, you know, everything, like all the data that we're gathering.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm open to changing my mind about everything. And because I knew my spaceflight was going to be short, I was a little bit skeptical as to how much is going to really change, you know,
Yeah.
my brain chemistry. Because it's a short trip, I always thought that you had to be, you know, you had to have your face pinned to the window for 6 months, and only then would it really do something to your brain. You
Yeah.
know, and I wasn't set on that belief, of course, but you know, that was kind of like my hypothesis at the beginning. So I went into it thinking, okay, let's see if this is actually going to do anything to my brain. And it was very, very surprising as to how much it really did. And it sounds weird, and it took me a long time to be able to put it into words, to be really able to communicate how it's changed me and how it's changed the way I do things, or how it's changed how much impact I'd like to have on the world, or just my views on things. And it really, really did change everything. I do believe that it changed a lot of how I see things. And I think it is a lot of it. And I'd love to see my brain scan before and after the flight because meditation changes your brain, right?
Yeah,
If you meditate for years at a time, and I think just as a shock to your brain, and biologically, we're not prepared for that.
yeah,
You're never prepared to see Earth from space. Our
yeah,
ancestors were never, had never had the opportunity to see Earth from space. So your brain was never evolved for that.
yeah.
So now
It's true.
going through that, it just really breaks your reality. It breaks your reality on everything and makes things, well, everything else just doesn't make the same sense anymore, right? And I think it's just like if you think about it, like it's just nothing makes sense. Like everything
Yeah,
is an experiment. It's all an experiment. And when you kind of look at the world in that way, then you tend to take bigger risks. And again, going back to the relationship with fear, what is fear? It's just kind of like something that you made up yourself in your brain to cope with that situation that you're in, and it's just kind of like your cortisol levels rising, but then you can actually control them, and like it's so much of it is just like everything is an experiment. You what you're like the reality that you saw was that like Earth is there and it's in the middle of nothingness. And that's the reality. This is the real thing. And everything else just completely changes. So, like I think for me when I was there, it just everything made sense. Everything that had happened before then that had led me to that point made sense. And it just clicked. It made sense why we do what we do. It made sense like why I've been drawn to this universe and the way that I've been drawn, and it felt so connected to it that this is this is the natural thing. This is what makes sense. And I've been pursuing that ever since, and I've been wanting everyone to know this and to believe in that and be able to experience it themselves too, because going back to not wanting to just tell people the information, like you have to
yeah,
experience it yourself, and everyone needs to, like no one has to be on, no, not everyone has to be on board, not everyone
yeah,
has to be convinced with this. It's the world wouldn't function if that was the case.
yeah,
But if someone wants to be able to, they should have the choice. It's about
yeah.
being able to make that choice. So for me, I will forever, I think, strive to go back, and I will forever strive to make sure that everyone has the possibility or that option to make that choice too. Because I never had that option too. And if it wasn't for, Space for Humanity for selecting me, um, like who knows when I could have had that option, the opportunity. And I think more and more now, we will have more people being, like having that access. And I would definitely love to, one day, like a dream of mine is to lead an all-African mission to the moon, let's say. Um, Definitely. And something that of course I'm working on, hopefully. Let's see.
Great, great, great. Yeah, Stuart.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to mention the overview effect. So thanks for bringing it up. Two things on that. One, the fact that you can have an experience like that, very well documented over the 50 or so years that humans have been going to space. The fact that you can have some version of that in a suborbital flight at a relatively short sort of time span that you're actually up there is very important to know, I think. There might be some sort of skepticism about it, but it's good that the research is being done on that one, because when you read about what the overview effect can produce in people's minds, it's very powerful. And so it's good to know that, at this point, probably one of the most accessible ways of getting to space, albeit still, quite expensive and quite exclusive, but, on its way to broadening the field, affords people a taste of that experience. I think that's quite important to say. And then just to wrap things up, I think what's also important to mention with the overview effect is that a lot of people who go to space and experience the overview effect and have this completely perspective shifting moment come back and tend to do something with that. And what you have done is founded the Deep Space Initiative. And that brings us to what this platform is about. And I want to talk about what is coming up next for the Deep Space Initiative. We will have some more podcast episodes delving into the team and delving into, I guess, the mission.
Yeah, we're really, really excited about this podcast, especially because I think we have Reggie and Stuart and I have been working on planning several really, really interesting episodes coming up and a lot of new seasons. We're really planning on getting really, really incredible guests for you guys to hear from.
I'm really, really excited about the Deep Space chats. I think great things are really going to happen here on this podcast. I've been really blown away with the mind and the the inspiration and the passion coming out of Sarah. I want to encourage everyone to, if you're thinking about getting into space, or you're like me that sort of put your dream away, or you're thinking of planning of a career in space, or you're looking to network, I think you should stay tuned to this podcast. You can also go to this deepspaceinitiative.org. You can join our community, sign up for our newsletter. There's so many ways you can become a member of the space community from wherever you are in the world. Like, as you can see, I'm in Ghana. Stuart in Scotland. There are so many people. I mean, you'll meet the rest of the some of members of the community in the upcoming episodes. So don't stay back. Don't think your dream's not possible. Have the boldness and the audacity of Sarah. I'm leaving this podcast with that kind of boldness. Like, the earth is just in nothingness, and and I'll try and imagine the view and have a different relationship with fear. So it's really, if she can do it, I mean, you also can do it. So really want to encourage you. Like I said, if you want to go high, you first have to go deep, and go deep with the Deep Space chats. And one thing I love about the Deep Space Initiative is our motto: why limit the limitless? You were created not to be, without limits. You are living in a universe that doesn't have limits. We are not even done exploring it. So don't put a limit on yourself. Don't let your environment be your limits. And then, let's join this rocket ship, and and then let's discover space and the universe together. Yeah. So thank you all for joining us today.